Hello and welcome to another video. Now, I've baked a few Swedish pastries in the past. Viewers might understand that I really like Swedish baking. So today we're going to do another one. We're going to do Kardammomabullar or Kadamomaknottar, depending upon who you talk to. Those names are used interchangeably. Kardammomabullar are cardamom knots. Kind of similar in some regards to cinnamon buns, but also a little bit different. The biggest difference is that they are filled with a cardamom mixture instead of a cinnamon mixture, and therefore they have a totally Scandinavian and very delicious flavor. So let's go ahead and get started. So for our dough we have 425 grams of flour, 75 grams of 75 grams of fine sugar, 75 grams of butter, 3 grams of salt, that's about half a teaspoon, and 5 grams of cardamom. And I'm going to hand grind this just before I use it. I also have 125 milliliters of water, 125 milliliters of milk, and one package, that is a 9-gram package, but a 7-gram package would work, of active dry yeast. Now this is an enriched dough. It has it's a yeast dough with butter and milk in it, and so you really want to use a high gluten flour. This is a strong bread flour. In German terms, we'd use a type 550. But if you can't, if you're in US terms, you're looking for a bread flour or a strong bread flour. For the filling, I have 100 grams of butter, 100 grams of sugar, and 10 grams of cardamom. Now you may be saying, that's a heck of a lot of cardamom, and it is, but that's the whole point of this pastry, so more cardamom is better. Onto the glaze. For the glaze, we have 50 milliliters of water, and we have a bunch of vanilla sugar. In this case, this is like 40 grams of vanilla sugar, and I might have to add a little more. You could use superfine sugar, or you could just use powdered sugar. The goal is just to have something that adds a little bit of water back in. And sometimes people use vanilla sugar in Sweden. It gives it a nice extra flavor. So there we are on that. On to starting the dough. So first I've added my water to a pot. I'm going to add the milk into it. And I'm going to bring this up until it's just slightly warm to the touch. And then we'll go ahead and get started at that point. I have this on medium, so this might take another 5-10 minutes. And then I'll be back. So to make the dough, the first thing we're going to do is add our flour, our sugar, our cardamom, which I've now ground, and our yeast into a bowl, and I'm going to mix it well. Then I will add the salt and stir in the wet ingredients. So we have this here. Now I stir in the salt. And now I will slowly stir in the wet ingredients. And normally the way I do it is I pour a bit into the middle. Now if you're using a stand mixer, of course, you can do it a little bit differently, but usually I start by adding a little bit to the middle, stirring it in with a fork, because that's a decent, that works kind of similar to dough hook. And then basically still stirring this in. And here is the rest. And then this should incorporate into kind of a rough dough. And I will stir this until all flour is well incorporated. And wow, is that smelling nice. You can really smell the cardamom at this stage already. There's a reason why you freshly grind your own cardamom. Don't just buy store-bought ground cardamom, because the the depth and complexity of flavor you get will be greatly improved by that. So the next step is going to be, I'm going to add this butter, which I've now kind of mashed a bit, and I'm going to slowly knead it in. And this will make the dough much more buttery than if I try to add everything all at once. The butter is relatively soft, so make sure you're not just taking like hard butter out of the refrigerator. Basically, I'm going to knead this in. I'm not going to go like through a lamination process like you would with like croissant dough, but I am going to basically knead this in. So now this creates a very buttery dough. Which is definitely not sticky, but it will get stickier as we let it rise. So once this is all nicely incorporated, we'll be done with this step. And here we have a nice dough butter mixture. Now this is actually a really big reason why we use high gluten flour, because the butter here interferes to some extent with the glutination process. So if you use a lower gluten flour, it's just simply not going to hold together. So the next step is to let this rise. So if you're baking in the summer, I just cover it with a cloth and leave it on the counter. Since it's winter, I'm going to set it in a warm water bath and cover it. And we'll go ahead and let it sit for an hour or so until it's doubled in size. Then we'll come back and you'll get to see that this is in fact growing and doing well. Now, while we're waiting for the dough to rise, I'm going to still go ahead and make my filling. I'm going to go ahead and add my now ground cardamom to my sugar, and I'm going to stir it together until it's nicely blended. So just like stir it until you have kind of a cardamom sugar mixture together. And you want to do this until it's pretty even. I think that's probably even enough. Then I'm going to weigh out, of this mixture, I'm going to weigh out 85 grams of it. Since it's probably better to go ahead and use that extra cardamom, I'm just going to go ahead and use the plate which I stored that cardamom on. There we go. Now I still have a little bit of this cardamom mixture, which I can use to dust the buns as we get them ready. Now to make the butter cardamom filling, I'm going to go ahead and take my butter, and I'm going to start by, mashing it a bit, and then I'm going to slowly work in the cardamom sugar, so that what I end up with at the end is a well-creamed mixture. Of course, you can use a stand mixture for this step also and just kind of cream everything together. That works well. But you can also do it by hand with just a little bit of work here. So you see I have a little bit mixed in, add a little bit more. And this will get easier to work with as it goes. The softer the butter is, the easier it is to work with, but it's not that important. I would definitely not start with like very cold butter right out of the fridge though. even in winter, room temperature butter should be fine. And you see, it takes a little bit of effort, but it's not that hard. And so, as we keep going, we're just mixing this in. And I guess I'll have one more bunch to mix in, and then that'll be it. I'm actually getting very close, so in a moment I'll be back to roll out the dough, and then we will go ahead and mix, we'll go ahead and fill this. Yep, we can see this is nicely creamed together. I'm still going to stir it a little bit more. It's a little easier off the camera, so I'll go ahead and do that. But as you can see, it's actually not that hard to do this part by hand. So now I have my floured surface prepared. I'm going to go ahead and just knead this lightly a little bit. And this is still a nice buttery dough, it's not sticky. And then I'm going to roll it out into a rough rectangle, approximately 40 centimeters by 50 centimeters. And then we'll fill it and go from there. So I've just basically rolled this out, and the flour is kind of underneath it mostly to make it easy to work with. I went ahead and I softened this up a little bit in a warm water bath to make it easier to spread. Now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of put pieces of it around, and then I will eventually spread it around with a spatula, but I'll come back to that on another segment. The reason for doing it this way is that it basically it basically becomes fairly easy to work with. So I'll be back in 1 second. We'll go ahead and spread this. So now I'm going to go ahead and basically I'm spreading this out with the spatula. The goal is to have a reasonably even coating on as much of it as possible. And this can take me a few minutes, so I won't necessarily have to keep you on the video the whole time. But you can see the basic process. And when I'm done, I should have a very nice even coating of the butter and cardamom and sugar mixture across the entire dough sheet. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put my parchment paper or baking paper on the baking sheets, and then I will come back here when I'm ready to fold this. Okay, so now this is nice and pretty even, and I'm going to slowly pull this up and fold it in half so that the filling is in the middle. And I'm going to pat it down a little bit to kind of make sure I don't have too much air in it. Then I'm going to cut this into strands, and then we will form the buns. So that's the next step. So to cut the buns, I'm just going to take, and I'm going to use a knife here, and I'm just going to trace some lines here. And I'm just going to do this with 4 of them to start. I'll do the rest off screen. But then I'm going to cut them again, run the knife the other direction, try to keep in the same groove so that they divide nicely like this. And this one kind of, because it's the end, didn't work quite right, so I'll come back to that one later. The next one should be fine though, dimension-wise. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to twist it until I have a spiral about this long. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and shape this into a bun. To shape the buns, the easiest way to do this is to take this in your hand, make a spiral, and then take the other end and tuck it inside like this. Now we have our knot. I will do that with all the rest of these, and then we'll come back while these are sitting on the tray. So this actually made about 23 of these. I've now shaped this set of 8 into knots. I'm going to take the rest of the sugar cardamom mixture and sprinkle it over all of the buns. So now I've sprinkled these with the cardamom and sugar, and in fact I still have a fair bit of the cardamom and sugar here, so I could save them for something else, maybe put it on bread with butter or whatever. The next step is to proofing. So I can put this in either in the oven at like 50 Celsius or 100 Fahrenheit, or I can leave this in the refrigerator overnight. Some people really say the refrigerator method is better. I'm going to go ahead and do a warm proofing this time, partly for reasons of time, and then I'll be back in about an hour. So these will go into the oven, and I'll be back in an hour to bring them out. So now these are done proofing. You can see they've at least doubled in size. And now I'm going to go ahead and bake them at 220 Celsius until they are golden brown. And we'll go ahead and then brush them with a glaze. Once we put them in the oven, I'll go ahead and make that glaze. So now I've just put the buns in the oven, and I'm going to go ahead and start the glaze. To do this, I have added 50 milliliters of water, and I'm going to add 40 grams of vanilla salt. Vanilla sugar. And then basically this will just go in here. And I will warm this up until all the sugar dissolves. This will form a syrup that I can then use to glaze the buns when they come out. If I need to, I could add one more packet of vanilla sugar. These are 8 grams each, so 5 of these is 40 grams. Or I could even add, and I might add, a little bit of my reserve cardamom sugar, just to add that last little bit of cardamom flavor to these buns. So I think I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to add just about a spoonful or so of the cardamom sugar, just a little bit here. And then we'll go ahead and just stir this as it warms up. But here's just going to add a little bit here. There we go. And that should be good. And as this warms up, the sugar will become more soluble, and it should just all dissolve. So now these have just come out of the oven. You'll notice they don't rise very much because of the amount of butter. And I'm going to just kind of brush them with this glaze. Then I'm going to cover them with a damp cloth to make sure they don't dry out, and we will go ahead and just kind of let them cool down, and then we'll go ahead and eat them after that. I probably won't use the whole amount of glaze. That's fine, but this should be really, 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 really good. So you can see this glaze just adds some moisture right back in, and that's going to make it really, really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up, and I'll just cover it with a cloth, and then we'll let these cool while the next batch is in. So now I've gone ahead and I've put 2 on this plate. You can just see they're nice. You could serve them with some coffee or something like this. And next I'm going to do the taste test. These are going to be absolutely delicious. Now for the taste test. These are quite delicious. The cardamom flavor really comes through, but it's not like over your head. The texture of these right now is pretty light. This is typical of a warm proofing. If I'd done a cold proofing, they would probably be more dense and with a slightly stronger flavor. I think most of the ones I've had in Sweden have been cold proofed. But still, these are really, really, really good. Definitely one of my favorites, and one of the pastries I really miss from Sweden. Anyway, bon appetit, hope you enjoy this.